Officer Brock Marcello walked into that courtroom like he owned the building. He thought the woman sitting at the defense table was just another statistic, another angry woman he could bully, silence, and frame with a badge and a lie. He mocked her silence. He laughed at her defense. He even smirked when the prosecutor recommended jail time. But Brock made a fatal calculation that morning. He didn't check the morning memo. He didn't know that the woman he was framing for disorderly conduct wasn't a criminal. She was Regina Vance, the newly appointed, merciless chief of police who had just been hired to clean up his corrupt precinct. And she wasn't sitting there to defend herself. She was sitting there to end him. The air in courtroom 4B of the Oak Creek County Courthouse always smelled of stale coffee and industrial floor wax, a scent that Officer Brock Marcello associated with victory. At 34 years old, with a jawline he spent too much time admiring in the rearview mirror and a uniform that was tailored just a little too tight across the biceps, Marcello considered himself the apex predator of the 42nd Precinct. He leaned back in the witness stand, chewing gum, a violation of Judge Harlan Prescott's rules, but one that Marcello knew he would get away with. He always did. He tapped his fingers on the wooden railing, looking out at the sparsely populated gallery. Officer Marcello, the prosecutor, a tired-looking man named Assistant District Attorney Martin Thorne, sighed. Thorne looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. He shuffled his papers, adjusting his glasses. "Could you please state for the record the events of Tuesday, November 14th? Marcello cleared his throat, shifting his gaze to the defense table. Sitting there was a woman. She was striking, though Marcello would never admit it out loud without adding a derogatory qualifier. She had dark skin, impeccable posture, and was wearing a navy blue pantsuit that looked expensive. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense bun. She hadn't said a word since the proceedings began. She simply watched him. Her eyes were dark, unblinking, and unsettlingly calm. Marcello smirked. He hated that look. He hated when they didn't look afraid. "Sure, Martin," Marcello said, deliberately using the DA's first name to show familiarity. "I was on patrol in Sector 4, near the intersection of Elm and 5th, high crime area. We get a lot of drug traffic through there." This was law number 1. Elm and 5th was a middle-class historic district. It had a bakery, a library, and a high-end dog groomer. But Marcello knew that if you painted the backdrop as a war zone, the judge would forgive the soldier for shooting. I observed the defendant's vehicle, a black sedan, swerving erratically, Marcello continued, his voice taking on that rehearsed, bored cadence cops used when they were reciting a script. I initiated a traffic stop. The driver, the defendant, he gestured vaguely at the woman, immediately exhibited aggressive behavior. The woman at the defense table wrote something down on a yellow legal pad. She didn't look up. "Aggressive how?" Thorne asked, going through the motions. "Yelling, flailing arms, refusing to comply with lawful orders." Marcello lied effortlessly. It flowed out of him like water. "I asked for license and registration 3 times. She started screaming about her rights, reaching under the seat. I feared for my safety, so I extracted her from the vehicle and placed her under arrest for disorderly conduct and resisting." Judge Prescott, a man in his 60s with a face like a crumpled paper bag and a reputation for siding with law enforcement 99% of the time, peered over his spectacles. "Reaching under the seat? In broad daylight?" "Yes, Your Honor." Marcello nodded gravely. "In my experience, that's usually where the weapon is," the court reporter typed furiously. The narrative was being set in stone. The angry, non-compliant woman versus the hero cop just trying to get home to his family. The truth, of course, was vastly different. The woman hadn't swerved. She had been driving 5 miles under the speed limit. Marcello had pulled her over because he was bored and because her car was nicer than his. When he approached the window, she hadn't screamed. She had simply asked, "Officer, may I ask the probable cause for this stop?" That question, asked with intelligence and dignity, was what triggered Brock Marcello. He despised being questioned. He despised anyone who didn't immediately cower. So, he dragged her out of the car, threw her against the hood, and cuffed her. He expected her to cry, to beg. She hadn't. She had just watched him, memorizing his badge number. 4922. She was lucky I didn't draw my service weapon, Marcello added for dramatic effect, looking at the jury box, although there was no jury today. It was a bench trial, just him, the judge, and the victim. I showed remarkable restraint. The woman's attorney, a court-appointed public defender named Elias Vane, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, stood up slowly. But before Vane could speak, the woman placed a hand on his arm. She whispered something to him. Vane looked surprised, then nodded and sat back down. The woman stood up. "Your Honor," she said. Her voice was a rich alto, smooth and commanding. It projected to the back of the room without her raising it. "I am representing myself pro se for the remainder of this hearing." Judge Prescott frowned. "Ms. Vance, is it? You have competent counsel. Are you sure you want to do that? Officer Marcello is a veteran of the force. He knows the law." "I'm sure he thinks he does," Regina Vance said coolly. "I would like to cross-examine the officer." Marcello chuckled, a short, sharp sound. "Oh, this is going to be good," he thought. "She's going to play lawyer. I'm going to eat her alive." "Allowed," the judge grumbled. "But keep it brief. I have a lunch reservation at 1. Regina walked out from behind the table. She didn't walk like a defendant. She walked like she was inspecting the troops. She stopped 5 feet from the witness stand and locked eyes with Marcello. For the first time all morning, Marcello felt a prickle of unease on the back of his neck. It wasn't fear. Not yet. It was the biological warning system of a predator, realizing another predator had entered the territory. "Officer Marcello," Regina began. She didn't look at her notes. She didn't need them. "You stated that I was swerving erratically on Elm Street. Can you define erratic for the court?" Marcello rolled his eyes, looking at the judge as if to say, "Can you believe this? You were all over the road, crossing the double yellow, hitting the curb." "The double yellow line," Regina repeated. "Officer, are you aware that the section of Elm Street between 4th and 6th was repaved 3 days prior to my arrest? The city hadn't painted the lines yet. There was no double yellow line to cross." Silence stretched across the courtroom. Marcello blinked. He hadn't noticed the roadwork. He just drove on autopilot. I meant the center of the road. You were crossing the center." "So you're amending your testimony?" Regina asked, her voice sharp. "I'm clarifying it," Marcello snapped, his face flushing slightly pink. "You were driving dangerously. That's the point." "Let's move to the stop itself," Regina continued, pacing slowly. "You claimed I was screaming and flailing. You said I was reaching under the seat. Did you find a weapon under the seat, officer?" I didn't search the car fully at the scene. We towed it," Marcello bluffed. "The impound report is in the file, Your Honor," Regina said, gesturing to the bench. "It lists the contents of the vehicle, a briefcase, a gym bag, and a sealed envelope containing transfer papers. No weapon, no drugs. So, Officer Marcello, if there was no weapon, what was I reaching for?" "I don't know what you were thinking." Marcello raised his voice, leaning forward. "You people, you get stopped and you start acting up. I have to make split-second decisions." Regina stopped pacing. She froze. "You people!" The atmosphere in the room shifted. Even Judge Prescott looked up from his file. "Criminals," Marcello corrected himself quickly, sweating now. "People who break the law." "I see," Regina said. "You also stated I was yelling." "Officer, is your body camera functioning?" This was the trap. Marcello knew the game. There was a technical malfunction. The battery died right before the stop. Convenient, I know, but equipment fails. We're underfunded. It was the standard lie. The 42nd Precinct had a notorious habit of having body cams that malfunctioned exactly when a suspect ended up with a black eye. "A malfunction," Regina said. She walked back to her table and picked up a flash drive. "That is interesting, because the dash cam in your patrol car doesn't run on a battery, does it? It runs on the vehicle's engine power." Marcello's heart skipped a beat. He had forgotten to turn off the dash cam, but he was parked behind her. The dash cam would only show the back of her car. It wouldn't show the assault he claimed happened at the driver's window. The dash cam was on, Marcello admitted, regaining his confidence. But it wouldn't show what you did inside the car. It wouldn't show you reaching. It wouldn't show your attitude. "No," Regina agreed, "but the microphone on your vest is synced to the dash cam audio, isn't it? Even if the video doesn't catch it, the audio records." Marcello went cold. He tried to remember what he had said. He had called her a name. He had told her to shut her mouth before he shut it for her. He had laughed when she asked for his badge number. "The audio was distorted," Marcello stammered. Heavy traffic noise. "Your Honor," Regina said, turning to the judge. "I would like to submit Exhibit B into evidence. This is the raw footage and audio from Officer Marcello's dash cam. It was obtained via a subpoena filed by my attorney 3 days ago. The department tried to block it, but the clerk of court released it this morning." Marcello looked at the prosecutor, Thorne. Thorne shrugged, as if to say, "I didn't know she had that." "Play it," Judge Prescott ordered, looking interested for the first time. Regina plugged the drive into the court's AV system. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. The video showed the rear of a sleek, black sedan. It was driving perfectly straight. No swerving. The siren chirped, and the car pulled over immediately, using a turn signal. Then came the audio. It was crystal clear. Door slams, footsteps crunching on gravel, Marcello's voice. "Well, look at this ride. Who'd you steal this from, sweetheart?" The courtroom gasped. A woman in the back row whispered, "Oh my God." Regina's voice, calm. "This is my vehicle." "Officer, may I ask the probable cause for this stop?" Marcello's voice. "Probable cause is whatever I say it is. Get out of the car. I want to see how much cash you've got in there. I bet you're holding, aren't you? Dealers always drive cars like this." Regina's voice. "I am not a drug dealer. I am asking you to follow protocol." Marcello's voice. Angry. "You want protocol? Here's protocol." There was a scuffle sound. The sound of a car door being yanked open. Then a thud. The sound of a body hitting metal. Marcello's voice. Stop resisting or I'll break your arm." Regina's voice, strained but calm. "I am not resisting. You are assaulting me." Marcello's voice. "Shut up! You think you're special because you're dressed up? You're just another hood rat in a suit. I own this street. I own you right now." Regina paused the video. The silence in the courtroom was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of a lie being utterly dismantled in real time. Marcello sat frozen in the witness box. His face was a mask of shock. He looked at the judge. Judge Prescott was glaring at him with a mixture of fury and disgust. "Technical malfunction?" Judge Prescott asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Heavy traffic noise?" "Your Honor, Marcello's voice cracked. He wiped sweat from his forehead. "That audio, it's taken out of context. It doesn't sound like... I was using tactical language to gain control of the suspect." "Tactical language?" Regina asked. She was standing right in front of him now. "Is hood rat tactical language, Officer Marcello? Is asking who I stole the car from standard operating procedure for the Oak Creek Police Department? You don't understand the streets," Marcello sneered, trying to regain his footing by attacking her. He leaned over the railing, his face twisting into a scowl. "You sit there in your fancy suit, but you don't know what we deal with. I protect this city. I make the calls. You're just a civilian who got caught." Regina smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of the executioner raising the axe. "A civilian," she repeated softly. "Is that what you think I am?" "I know what you are," Marcello spat. "You're a nobody." Regina turned to the back of the courtroom. "Captain Miller, could you please step forward?" The doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Captain David Miller, the current head of internal affairs and Marcello's direct superior, walked in. But he wasn't alone. Behind him were 2 state troopers. Marcello looked confused. "Cap, what are you doing here? Tell them. Tell them who I am." Captain Miller walked past the bar, stopping next to Regina. He looked at Marcello with pure disappointment. "I can't help you, Brock," Miller said quietly. "Officer Marcello," Regina said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice of absolute authority. "You seem to be under the impression that I am a defendant. You seem to think this hearing is about a traffic ticket." She reached into her blazer pocket. Marcello flinched, thinking she was pulling a weapon. She pulled out a leather wallet. She flipped it open. A gold badge, larger and more ornate than Marcello's, glinted under the fluorescent lights. "My name is Regina Vance," she said. "I am the former Deputy Commissioner of Philadelphia, and as of 8 a.m. this morning, I am the new Chief of Police for Oak Creek." Marcello's eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a wax figure. "I didn't want my first week to be administrative," Regina continued, leaning in close so only he could hear the steel in her voice. "I wanted to see my officers in action. I wanted to see how you treat the people you swore to protect. And Officer Marcello, you put on quite a show." The silence in courtroom 4B was no longer heavy. It was electric. It buzzed in the ears of everyone present, a high-pitched frequency of pure shock. Officer Brock Marcello stared at the gold badge in Regina Vance's hand. The metal caught the fluorescent light, gleaming like a miniature sun that blinded him to everything else. His brain, usually quick to find an excuse or a loophole, had ground to a complete halt. "Chief?" Marcello whispered, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "No, that's impossible. Chief Vance is I heard he was a transfer from Chicago." "She," Regina corrected, snapping the wallet shut with a sound that cracked like a whip. "And it was Philadelphia. If you paid as much attention to your department briefings as you do to harassing citizens, you would know that." Judge Prescott cleared his throat. The sound was loud in the quiet room. He looked at the paperwork Regina had submitted, the transfer papers Marcello had ignored in the car. The judge's face, usually a mask of boredom, was now pale. He realized he had been seconds away from sentencing the new chief of police to jail based on the lies of a corrupt subordinate. "Officer Marcello," the judge said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage, "you are still under oath. Do you wish to amend your statement regarding the events of November 14th? Marcello looked around desperately. He looked at the prosecutor, Martin Thorne. Thorne was busy stuffing papers into his briefcase, refusing to make eye contact, distancing himself from the blast radius. He looked at Captain Miller, his superior, whose face was made of stone. "Your Honor, Marcello stammered, his confident posture collapsing. He looked small now. The uniform that was too tight suddenly looked like a costume he didn't deserve to wear. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. She didn't identify herself." "I shouldn't have to," Regina said, her voice cutting through his stammering. She turned to face the gallery, addressing the few people watching, then turned back to Marcello. "A badge is not a license to bully, officer. It is a burden of trust. And you? You have just proven you are too weak to carry it." Regina looked up at the bench. "Your Honor, I move for immediate dismissal of all charges against me with prejudice. Furthermore, I am requesting that the transcript of this trial, specifically Officer Marcello's perjury regarding the double yellow lines and the assault, be forwarded to the District Attorney's Special Crimes Unit." "Granted," Judge Prescott said immediately, banging his gavel. "Case dismissed. Mr. Thorne?" The prosecutor jumped. "Yes, Your Honor?" "I expect an indictment against Officer Marcello for perjury and filing a false police report on my desk by 5 o'clock today. Do not test me on this." "Understood, Your Honor," Thorne squeaked. Marcello panicked. The walls were closing in. "Indictment? Wait, hold on. You can't do this. I'm a decorated officer. I have commendations. You can't arrest a cop for doing his job." Regina walked over to Captain Miller. She spoke softly, but in the dead silence of the room, everyone heard it. "Captain, take his badge. And his gun?" Miller nodded. He stepped forward, his face grim. "Brock, give it up." "Dave, come on," Marcello pleaded, taking a step back. "It's me. It's Brock. We play poker on Thursdays. Don't do this in front of them." He gestured to the civilians in the gallery, people he had likely terrorized before. "You did this to yourself," Miller said. "Hand it over." Trembling, Marcello unholstered his weapon and handed it to Miller, butt first. Then, with shaking fingers, he unpinned the badge, from his chest. When he handed it over, he felt a strange lightness, as if his identity had been stripped away. Without the badge, he was just a man in a polyester shirt who had made a terrible mistake. "Turn around," Miller said, pulling out his handcuffs. "No," Marcello whispered, tears pricking his eyes. "Not here. Please, Cap. Not in the courtroom. Let me walk out. I'll turn myself in at the station." Regina stepped into his line of sight. She was close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something subtle, sandalwood and steel. "You handcuffed me on the side of the road in front of passing traffic," Regina reminded him, her eyes devoid of sympathy. "You threw me against the hood of my car while neighbors watched. You wanted to make a spectacle of your power, Officer Marcello. Now, you will serve as a spectacle of justice." She nodded to Miller. "Cuff him." The metallic click-click of the handcuffs echoed through the room. It was a sound Marcello had heard 1,000 times, but always from the other side. Feeling the cold steel bite into his own wrists was a shock that made his knees buckle. 2 state troopers stepped forward, grabbing Marcello by the elbows. They didn't treat him with the professional courtesy usually reserved for officers. They handled him like a criminal, because that's what he was. As they marched him down the center aisle, the doors to the courtroom opened. A reporter from the Oak Creek Gazette, tipped off by Regina's new press secretary, was standing there with a photographer. Flash. The camera captured the image that would be on the front page the next morning. Officer Brock Marcello, the bully of the 42nd Precinct, weeping in handcuffs, being led away by the very system he thought he owned. Regina watched him go. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply picked up her briefcase, adjusted her blazer, and looked at Captain Miller. "Captain," she said, I believe I have a precinct to inspect. Drive me to the station." The 42nd Precinct Station House was a fortress of brick and concrete on the corner of Main and First. Inside, the atmosphere was usually raucous, cops joking, phones ringing, the chaotic energy of a busy shift. But today, as Captain Miller's unmarked cruiser pulled up to the curb, a strange hush had fallen over the building. News travels fast in law enforcement, faster than radio waves. By the time Regina Vance stepped out of the car, the text messages had already circulated. "Marcello got arrested in court. The new chief is the woman he grabbed. She's coming." Regina paused on the sidewalk, looking up at the building. It was dirty. The windows were grime-streaked. There was trash near the entrance. It reflected the rot inside. "Ready, Chief?" Captain Miller asked. He looked nervous. He knew that if Marcello was going down, the spotlight would soon turn to the supervisors who had let Marcello run wild. "I was ready 10 years ago, David," Regina said. "Let's go." She walked through the double doors. The front desk sergeant, a heavy-set man named O'Malley, who had been protecting Marcello since the academy, looked up. His face was pale. He scrambled to stand up, knocking over his coffee cup. Brown liquid spilled over the blotter, dripping onto the floor. "Attenhut!" O'Malley barked, his voice cracking. The bullpen went silent. 30 officers froze. Some were mid-bite of a sandwich. Others were typing reports. They all turned to look at the woman standing in the center of the room. Regina didn't yell. She didn't climb on a desk. She simply walked to the center of the room and stood there, her hands clasped behind her back. She scanned the faces. She saw fear in some, defiance in others, and guilt in most. "At ease," she said calmly. Nobody moved. They were too terrified to relax. "My name is Chief Regina Vance," she began. "Some of you have already heard about the events of this morning. Officer Marcello has been relieved of duty and is currently being processed at county jail." A murmur went through the room. It was real. The untouchable Brock Marcello was gone. "I know what you're thinking," Regina continued, starting to walk slowly down the rows of desks. She stopped at Marcello's empty desk. It was cluttered with accolades, a blue Lives Matter sticker, and a photo of him holding a big fish. She picked up the photo, looked at it, and placed it face down. "You're thinking that Marcello was just unlucky. You're thinking that he just picked the wrong target. You're thinking that if he had done that to a waitress, or a nurse, or a teacher, he would still be sitting here." She turned to face Sergeant O'Malley. "Is that what you think, Sergeant?" O'Malley swallowed hard. I don't know what you mean, Chief." "I think you do," Regina said, walking toward the high desk. "I pulled the logs, Sergeant. Officer Marcello has had 22 excessive force complaints in the last 3 years. 22. Do you know how many of them were investigated?" O'Malley looked down at his shoes. "Internal Affairs is backed up." "0, Regina said sharply. 0 were investigated. And do you know whose signature is at the bottom of the dismissal forms for every single one of those complaints?" She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and slapped it onto the wet coffee stain on O'Malley's desk. "Yours, Sergeant O'Malley." The room gasped. This wasn't just about Marcello anymore. This was a purge. "You designated them unsubstantiated, without interviewing a single witness," Regina accused, her voice rising with controlled intensity. "You protected him. You let him think he was a god. And because of you, he assaulted a citizen who turned out to be your boss." Regina turned back to the room. "The culture of this precinct changes right now. Today. If you are a bully, if you cover up for bullies, or if you think your badge makes you better than the people you serve, hand in your resignation by the end of the shift. Because if I have to find you, and I will find you, you won't just lose your job, You will lose your pension. You will lose your freedom. She pointed to the clock on the wall. It is 1 p.m. I am initiating a full audit of the evidence room, the dashcam servers, and the arrest logs for the last 5 years. Captain Miller? Yes, Chief? Miller stepped forward. I want the keys to Marcello's locker, and I want the keys to Sergeant O'Malley's office. O'Malley's eyes bulged. My office? Chief, you can't. That's private. It's government property, Sergeant. Regina smiled coldly. And I have probable cause to believe it contains evidence of a conspiracy to obstruct justice. You can't do this, O'Malley shouted, his face turning red. We have a union. You can't just walk in here and tear the place apart. Watch me, Regina said. She gestured to 2 young officers near the back, rookies who looked terrified but hopeful. They were the ones who hadn't been corrupted yet. You 2. Officers? Officer Chen, ma'am, said a young Asian-American woman. Officer Diaz, ma'am, said a tall Hispanic man. Chen, Diaz. Escort Sergeant O'Malley to the conference room. He is suspended pending an administrative hearing. If he touches his computer or his phone, arrest him for obstruction. The rookies looked at each other, then at the furious Sergeant O'Malley. It was a test. The old guard versus the new order. Officer Chen stepped forward, her jaw set. Sir, please step away from the desk. O'Malley looked around for support, but the other officers, the veterans who usually backed him up, were looking at the floor, pretending to be busy. They saw the writing on the wall. The king was dead, and the queen was burning the castle down. Defeated, O'Malley stepped away. Regina walked into the captain's office, now her office. She stood by the window, looking out at the city she had sworn to protect. She watched as a squad car pulled up below. They were bringing Marcello's personal effects out in a cardboard box, but she knew this wasn't over. Marcello wasn't the type to go down quietly. He had connections. He had dirt on powerful people, and a cornered rat doesn't just squeak, it bites. Her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She answered it. Chief Vance, you made a big mistake, Regina, a voice rasped. It sounded like gravel in a blender. It was a voice she didn't recognize, but the tone was unmistakable. Who is this? You think arresting Brock ends this? The voice laughed darkly. Brock was just the collection agent. You have no idea whose money you just messed with. You should have stayed in Philly. The line went dead. Regina lowered the phone, her eyes narrowing. She had expected pushback from the union. She had expected anger from the cops. But she hadn't expected a threat from the outside so soon. Marcello wasn't just a bad cop. He was a bagman. He was collecting for someone. She turned to Captain Miller, who was standing in the doorway. David, she said, cancel the evidence audit. Miller looked confused. Cancel it? But you said, I changed my mind, Regina said, her mind racing. We're not looking for lost drugs or missing cash anymore. What are we looking for? We're looking for a ledger, Regina said. Marcello was moving money, and I want to know who was paying him. The drama was just beginning. She had cut off the head of the snake, only to find out it was a hydra, and the body was coiling around the entire city. The office of the precinct sergeant usually smelled of stale donuts and cigarettes, but Sergeant O'Malley's office had a different scent, expensive cologne and fear. Regina locked the door behind her, pulling the blinds shut. Captain Miller stood by the filing cabinets, looking like a man walking the plank. You really think there's a ledger? Miller asked, his voice hushed. O'Malley isn't the type to write things down. He's old school, no paper trail. Everyone writes things down, David, Regina said, putting on a pair of latex gloves. Especially the greedy ones. They need to know who owes them, and more importantly, who they own. She didn't start with the computer. The IT department was already imaging the hard drive, But Regina knew O'Malley wouldn't keep the dirty stuff on a government network. She went for the physical space. She checked the underside of the desk drawers. She checked the hollow space behind the framed commendations on the wall. Nothing. She stood in the center of the room, scanning. Her eyes landed on a heavy, dusty safe in the corner. "We don't have the combination," Miller said, "and O'Malley isn't talking." "I don't need the combination," Regina said. She walked over to the bookshelf and pulled down a heavy binder labeled Emergency Procedures. She flipped to the back. Taped to the inside cover, written in faint pencil, were 3 numbers, 220984. Miller blinked. "How did you know?" "Lazy cops hide keys under the mat," Regina murmured. "And arrogant cops hide passwords in plain sight because they think no one would dare look." She spun the dial. Click, click, click. The handle turned. Inside, there was no cash. There were no drugs. There was only a single, black, leather-bound notebook and a stack of photos. Regina opened the notebook. It wasn't just a ledger, it was a payroll. Nov 1, B. Martello, $5,000, collection. Nov 3, Judge P., campaign fund, $10,000. Nov 10, the Greeks, dockside clear, $20,000. Judge P., Miller read over her shoulder, his face draining of color. "Judge Prescott, the judge who just dismissed your case?" "Everyone has a price," Regina said grimly. "Prescott dismissed the case because he saw my badge and got scared. But before that, he was part of the machinery. He let Marcello run wild because Marcello was the enforcer for something bigger." She flipped to the back of the book. There was a name written in red ink, circled 3 times. It wasn't a name she recognized immediately, but the title sent a chill down her spine. Councilman Halloway. Robert Halloway. The city council chairman. The man running for mayor on a platform of law and order. The man who controlled the police budget. Marcello wasn't just shaking down motorists, Regina realized, piecing it together. He was the bagman for Halloway's protection racket. The high-crime areas Marcello patrolled. They weren't high crime. They were high profit. Businesses paid for protection, or Marcello shut them down with fake violations. Suddenly the phone on the desk rang. Not the office line, a burner phone taped underneath the bottom shelf of the safe. Regina stared at it. It buzzed like an angry hornet. She picked it up. She didn't speak. "O'Malley," the gravelly voice from before spoke. It was the same voice that had threatened her. "I heard Marcello got clipped. Tell me you have the book. If the new chief finds that book, we are all dead." Regina smiled, a predator's smile. "I'm afraid Sergeant O'Malley is indisposed at the moment." There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy silence. "You," the voice hissed. "You have the book." "I do," Regina said calmly. "And I'm looking at the entry for the Greeks. Tell me, does Councilman Halloway know you're this sloppy on the phone?" "Listen to me very carefully, Chief Vance," the voice dropped low. "You are not in Philadelphia anymore. You don't know how this city works. That book, it's a death warrant. Burn it, walk away. We can make you rich, or we can make you a headline in the obituaries. Tragic home invasion. It happens every day. Is that a threat?" "It's a forecast," the voice said. "You have until midnight to put that book in the trash behind the station. If you don't, we release the file on you." "The file?" Regina frowned. "We know about your brother, Regina," the voice taunted. "We know why you really left Chicago before Philly. We know everything. Midnight." The line clicked dead. Regina slowly lowered the phone. Her hands were steady, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. Her brother. It was the one secret she had buried deep. The one thing that could hurt her. "Chief?" Captain Miller asked. What did he say? Regina looked at Miller. She needed to know if she could trust him. Really trust him. He threatened my family, Regina said, and he threatened me. She shoved the notebook into her inside blazer pocket. Captain, I need you to do something for me, and if you do this, there is no going back. If we fail, we both go to prison, or worse. Miller straightened his spine. He was a good cop who had been beaten down by a bad system. He looked at the notebook in her pocket, then at the badge on her chest. I've got 3 years until retirement, Chief, Miller said. But I didn't become a cop to protect guys like Holloway. What do you need? I need a team, Regina said. Not the veterans. I can't trust them. I need the rookies, Chen and Diaz, and I need a secure location. Somewhere off the grid. I have a cabin up near the reservoir, Miller said. No internet. No landline. Perfect, Regina said. Get the rookies. Meet me there in 2 hours. I'm going to pay a visit to the county jail. You're going to see Marcello? Miller asked, shocked. Why? Because, Regina checked her watch. The voice said I have until midnight. That means I have 10 hours to make Brock Marcello flip on his bosses, and I know exactly how to do it. The interrogation room at the Oak Creek County Jail was a concrete box with a steel table bolted to the floor. Brock Marcello sat on the other side of the glass, wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with his complexion. He looked smaller without his uniform, but the arrogance was still there in his eyes. He smirked when Regina walked in. Well, well, Marcello drawled. Come to apologize. My lawyer says I'll be out by dinner. Illegal search. Entrapment. You played yourself, Chief. Regina didn't sit down. She stood by the door, the guard posted outside. Your lawyer is a man named Arthur Pence, Regina said casually. Expensive. $500 an hour. Strange for a cop making 60 grand a year. I have a benevolent fund, Marcello said, reciting the line he'd been fed. You have Councilman Holloway, Regina corrected. Marcello's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. I don't know who that is. You do, Regina said. She pulled a single photo from her pocket, one of the photos she found in the safe. It showed Marcello shaking hands with Councilman Holloway outside a strip club, exchanging a thick white envelope. November 3rd, a $10,000 payout. We have the ledger, Brock. Marcello laughed, but it sounded forced. Pictures can be faked. Ledgers can be forged. You got nothing. And you know what? By tomorrow morning, you're going to be the one in cuffs. I heard about the story the Gazette is running. Police chief's drug addict brother. A conflict of interest. Regina's face remained a mask of stone, though the mention of her brother stung. They were moving fast. You think Holloway cares about you? Regina stepped closer to the table. You think you're his partner? Brock, look at me. You are a loose end. You are a liability. I'm a soldier, Marcello spat. They take care of their own. Really? Regina pulled out her phone. She played a recording, not of the traffic stop, but of the call she had received an hour ago in O'Malley's office. Voice on recording. Marcello got clipped. Tell me you have the book. If the new chief finds that book, we are all dead. Regina paused it. Notice he didn't say, get Marcello a lawyer. He said, if she finds the book, we are dead. He thinks you're going to talk, Brock. And men like Holloway don't take chances with rats. Marcello stared at the phone. He was sweating now. I'm offering you a life raft, Regina said softly. You're going down for perjury and assault. That's 5 years minimum. But if they tack on racketeering and conspiracy, that's 20. Unless what? Marcello whispered. Unless you turn witness, you give me Holloway, you give me the syndicate, And I talk to the DA about reducing your sentence to time served and probation. You lose the badge, obviously, but you keep your life." Marcello looked at the door. He looked at the mirror, wondering who was watching. "I can't," he croaked. "They'll kill me." "They're going to kill you anyway," Regina said brutally. "Tonight, in your cell, a jagged toothbrush to the neck, a suicide. Why do you think you're in general population and not protective custody? Holloway pulled strings to put you in here with the people you arrested." Marcello's eyes widened. He realized she was right. He had been placed in a cell block with 3 gang members he had personally brutalized. He thought it was a mistake. Now he knew it was a hit. "Get me out," Marcello begged, his voice cracking. "Please, I'll tell you everything. I'll tell you where the money is. Just get me out of here." "Talk first," Regina said, pulling a digital recorder from her pocket. "Start with the councilman." For the next hour, Brock Marcello sang. He spilled everything: the protection rackets, the payoffs to zoning judges to condemn properties, so Holloway's developers could buy them cheap, the planted evidence on business owners who refused to sell. He named names. He gave dates. When he was done, he was shaking. "Okay," Marcello said. "I talked. Now move me." "I'm moving you to federal custody," Regina said, tapping on the door for the guard. "The FBI is waiting outside. You're their asset now." As the guards hauled a sobbing, relieved Marcello away, Regina's phone buzzed. It was a text from Officer Chen. "Chief, we have a problem. The media is here, and Councilman Holloway is with them. They're outside the precinct." Regina gritted her teeth. The counterattack had begun. Holloway was trying to get ahead of the story, to paint her as the villain before the indictments could drop. She drove back to the station, her siren wailing. When she arrived, the steps of the 42nd Precinct were a circus. TV cameras, microphones, and a crowd of angry protesters. Paid agitators, she guessed. Standing at the podium was Councilman Robert Holloway. He was a tall, silver-haired man with a trustworthy face and a suit that cost more than Regina made in a month. "And that is why," Holloway was bellowing into the microphones, "I am calling for the immediate resignation of Chief Regina Vance. She has been in our city for less than 24 hours and has already launched a witch hunt against our brave officers. She is soft on crime. She has a family history of drug abuse. And she is dismantling the 42nd Precinct from the inside out." The crowd cheered. "Back the blue! Back the blue!" they chanted, ironically supporting the very corruption that hurt them. Regina stepped out of her car. She was alone. Captain Miller and the rookies were at the safe house with the evidence. She had to buy them time. She walked through the crowd. People jeered at her. Someone threw a water bottle. It splashed against her shoe. She didn't flinch. She walked straight up the stairs to the podium. Holloway turned, seeing her. He smiled, a shark's smile. "Ah, Chief Vance. So nice of you to join us. I was just telling the people about your incompetence." Regina stepped up to the mic. She looked out at the sea of cameras. "Councilman Holloway is a good speaker," Regina said, her voice amplified across the square. "He talks a lot about law and order. He talks a lot about safety." She turned to face him. The cameras zoomed in. "But I'm curious, Councilman. If you care so much about the law, why did you pay Officer Brock Marcello $10,000 on November 3rd? The crowd went silent. Holloway's smile froze. "That is a lie," Holloway hissed, leaning away from the mic. "I will sue you for slander." "I have the ledger, Robert," Regina whispered, just loud enough for the mic to catch a mumble. Then she spoke clearly to the press. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, you want a story? I have a story. It's not about my brother. It's not about a traffic stop. It's about how the man standing next to me turned the 42nd precinct into his personal piggy bank. "Cut the mic!" Holloway shouted to his aide. "Cut it!" The sound system screeched and went dead. But it didn't matter. Regina raised her voice, projecting with the power of 20 years on the force. "I am holding a press conference in 1 hour," she shouted to the reporters, "at the Federal Building with the FBI, and I will be releasing the confession of Officer Brock Martello." The reporters went into a frenzy, shouting questions, turning their cameras away from Holloway and toward Regina. Holloway looked around, realizing he had lost control of the narrative. He stepped close to Regina, his face twisted in hate. "You won't make it to the Federal Building," he threatened in a low voice. "You think you won? You just started a war." Regina looked him dead in the eye. "I didn't start it, Councilman, but I am going to finish it." She turned and walked down the stairs, the cameras following her every move. She knew Holloway wasn't bluffing. The drive to the Federal Building was only 20 minutes. But in a city controlled by the syndicate, 20 minutes was a lifetime. She got into her car. Officer Diaz was in the driver's seat. "Where to, Chief?" Diaz asked, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Drive," Regina said, checking her side mirror. A black SUV pulled out behind them. Then another. "And don't stop for red lights." The speedometer on Regina's unmarked cruiser hit 80. Beside her, Officer Diaz's knuckles were white on the wheel. "They're gaining, Chief," Diaz yelled. In the rearview mirror, 2 black SUVs were weaving through traffic like sharks, closing the distance. These weren't police vehicles. They were Holloway's private muscle, sent to silence them before they reached the feds. "Keep it steady," Regina ordered, her voice eerily calm as she patched through to the FBI. "Agent Martello, we have hostiles. Eastbound on 4th. We're coming in hot." The lead SUV slammed into their rear bumper, the metal screeching. The cruiser fishtailed violently. "They're trying to run us off." Diaz fought the steering wheel. "The alley up ahead," Regina pointed. "Cut through the industrial district. Now!" Diaz yanked the wheel. The cruiser drifted, tires smoking, and shot into the narrow gap between 2 brick warehouses. The SUVs followed, roaring into the tight space. It was a gauntlet of trash cans and concrete. "Brake check!" Regina shouted. "Do it!" Diaz slammed the brakes. The lead SUV, following too close, smashed into the back of the cruiser. Airbags deployed, and steam poured from the SUV's crushed radiator, effectively blocking the alley for the second pursuer. "Go!" Regina commanded. They burst out of the alley, leaving the wreckage behind. Ahead, the Federal Building loomed like a concrete sanctuary, but the plaza out front was a circus. Dozens of news cameras were already set up, and standing center stage was Councilman Robert Holloway. He had beaten them there. "A tragic mental breakdown," Holloway was bellowing into the microphones, his face a mask of faux concern. "Chief Vance is unstable. She just led officers on a high-speed chase. I am moving to have her removed immediately for the safety of this city." Diaz slowed the battered cruiser. "Chief, his security team is blocking the stairs. If we get out, they'll claim self-defense and open fire." Regina unbuckled her seatbelt. "They won't shoot, not with 50 cameras rolling." She stepped out into the sunlight. The shutter clicks sounded like a swarm of locusts. Holloway smiled, a predator seeing its prey caught in a trap. "And here she is," Holloway announced, "the woman trying to tear our city apart." Regina walked straight through the crowd, stopping 5 feet from him. She looked immaculate, her spine made of steel. "You seem out of breath, Councilman," she said loudly. "Did you run here to beat the truth?" Holloway leaned in, his voice a low hiss only she could hear. "You have nothing. Marcello is a liar. The ledger is inadmissible. You're finished, Regina." "You're right, Robert. Marcello is a liar," Regina replied, her voice amplifying over the crowd. "That's why I didn't rely on his word." She pulled a small black USB drive from her pocket. "While you were giving speeches, my team was recovering Marcello's insurance policy. He recorded every order you ever gave him." Halloway's face drained of color. Regina tossed the drive to a cameraman from Channel 5. "Plug it in." Moments later, a voice boomed over the plaza's broadcast speakers. It was Halloway's voice, clear, arrogant, and undeniable. "Listen to me, Brock. The bakery on 5th. They missed a payment. Shut them down. And if the owner gives you lip, remind him that his daughter walks home from school at 3 p.m. The crowd gasped. The threat against a child hung in the air like toxic smoke. Regina signaled to cut the audio. She looked at Halloway, who was now trembling. The press recoiled from him as if he were radioactive. "That," Regina announced, "is the sound of Oak Creek being sold out by the man sworn to protect it. Arrest her!" Halloway shrieked at his guards. "Seize that drive!" The guards looked at Regina. They looked at the FBI agents swarming down the stairs. Slowly, the lead guard raised his hands and stepped away from the councilman. Halloway stood alone. "Robert Halloway," Regina said, pulling out her handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start using it." As the cuffs clicked shut, a cheer erupted from the crowd. Justice had finally arrived. 6 months later. The air in courtroom 4B no longer smelled of lies. It smelled of accountability. In the defendant's chair sat Brock Marcello. He looked small in his orange jumpsuit, stripped of the uniform he had used as a weapon. He had cut a deal to testify against Halloway, avoiding 20 years, but the judge was not lenient on his abuse of power. "Brock Marcello," Judge Davies read, "for perjury, assault, and civil rights violations, I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison." Marcello closed his eyes. When the bailiffs led him away, he glanced at the back of the room. Regina Vance was watching. He wanted to hate her, but when he met her gaze, he saw only justice. He looked away, defeated. Miles away, the 42nd Precinct was transformed. The blue wall of silence had been demolished. Officer Chen, now Sergeant Chen, ran the desk with integrity. Chief Regina Vance sat in her office, looking at a photo of her brother, now sober and safe. She watched a patrol car pull out of the lot below. The driver signaled the turn. The corruption had been deep, but the shadows had been burned away. The lioness was watching, and finally, the city was safe. This story isn't just a drama. It's a reflection of a reality too many people face. It's about the intoxicating nature of unchecked power, the horrifying ease with which prejudice can hide behind a badge, and the immense courage it takes to stand alone against a corrupt system. Brock Marcello and Councilman Halloway thought they were untouchable because they controlled the narrative. They forgot that the truth has a way of kicking down the door, especially when it's armed with a righteous fury and a smart plan. Karma didn't just hit them, it bulldozed them, proving that no one is above the law, especially those sworn to uphold it. If this story fired you up, if you believe in accountability and justice, please smash that like button and share this video. It helps us get these stories out there. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a new episode of hard-hitting drama. What did you think of Regina's strategy? Would you have handled the chase differently? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.